I practiced administrative law for 40 years, not in the energy area, but in land use development and zoning. And the regulatory process are complicated. I think their schedule is a little optimistic. But nonetheless, it's their schedule, and I won't dispute it one way or the other. But the fact of the matter is irrespective of the governor's position, irrespective of anyone's position, what AES has to do to open that plant is get approval from a number of federal agencies and some state agencies. And in terms of the state agencies, in terms of the Maryland Department of Environment, and I don't think any party here would dispute that, has attempted to approach their review of these applications in a balanced and objective manner, as they do in all these. We don't, by law or by fact, interfere with regulatory decisions. They have to be made independently. And at times, that has been, Baltimore County has criticized us. The governor's personal opinion about the project or reservation about the project don't really go to the issue of how MDE reviews those. But many of the reviews are beyond the scope of the state government. They're federal approvals, the Coast Guard, the Commerce Department, Energy Department, and many, may or may not be approved. I know the track record, I know the history on these. These are often controversial. Of 24 throughout the country, I believe 23 have been approved, but they're always fairly complicated approvals, and we'll just have to see how this one turns out. As we sit here today, the governor is not persuaded by the evidence that he's heard. Now, as recently brought to our attention some of the arguments about the environmental issues. He's going to, I think, prepare a package and submitting it as consistent with what the governor said in the meetings with everyone. He's open to any information anybody wants to send to him. But there are, I think it does us no good to pretend there aren't issues that they don't have to be addressed. And once again, in terms of the project labor agreement, if all approvals are met, the project is constructed, that's a good thing. We don't, frankly, criticize or have any objection to AES as a company. My understanding is they're a fine company and do good work, but they have to go through a very complicated regulatory process, the same as any applicant in this area. Now, in terms of comparing this to past LNG plants, once again, I don't hold myself as an expert in this area, but it's my experience in regulatory law that as time goes by, all regulation gets more and more complicated. So, without knowing the facts, I don't know if you can't debate it, but comparing one regulatory approval to one several years ago or in the past is not necessarily always the best comparison. And even comparing them in the same time periods aren't necessary because you don't know what particular issues are regarding that. But at the end of the day, what will determine whether that facility is approved and built is the ability of the applicant, and the burden is on them, to obtain approvals from a myriad of agencies, most of which are not state, many of which are federal. I think our door continues to be open, and we hope that we continue to talk about this. Doesn't mean the governor's changed his position. He told when he met with him that he hadn't, but he would keep listening to the issues you have to say. It doesn't mean we disagree with all elements of what we're talking about. We do think that the safety concerns, particularly as shipping as it comes up the bay, is a critical element, particularly in regard to the neighborhood, and those have to be addressed in any regulatory approval. We hope they will be, but addressing them are probably pretty much beyond the scope of the state government, and largely applies with the federal government. Let me talk, also moving on to the third actor here, about the video lottery of the slot facilities. I actually scheduled a meeting, and a number of folks came up to it up in Sessom County last month to address this. I know there were concerns on two ends. Among some of the operating unions, there was a concern that the labor peace agreement provision was unenforceable in the law. The Attorney General ruled that no, it was enforceable, and that largely been misapprehension, and many of the operators are entering into labor peace agreements. Now, I appreciate that that does not necessarily, require project labor agreements. And one of the difficulties here is the statute only requires the operators to do labor peace agreements, and frankly, in most of the applications, there are no competitors. So, in terms of being able to have any sort of choice between applicants, it's just simply not there. In some instances, the only applicant in Western Maryland hasn't even been able to meet the criteria of the statute. So before we can even get to discussing project labor with them, we have to get to the point where they can actually get approved, which is in all of our interests, including the states. Now, once again, as important as jobs are in this area, the state obviously has a broader view as well, which is revenue from the local communities, et cetera, et cetera. But we do believe that having project labor agreements on these are beneficial, would be good for the community, good for the workers, and good for the state. And I've entered into discussions with some of the prospective owners about those. Please report that their initial reaction is reasonable. They're open to discussion. Obviously, they have concerns. Their concerns are they regard Maryland as having a very low percentage, we take out on these, one of the lowest in the country. So obviously, they're concerned about their construction costs. They're also, in each of these applications, there are individual issues. For instance, up in Cecil County, with Penn National has a tax income financing district. So, Vance has learned more than he cares to know about the last 2 years up in there. Cecil County Commissioners voted down yesterday, 3-2. That affects their financial ability. Obviously, the one in Laurel is embroiled in serious zoning issues. There are different issues for different ones, but I've talked to you all familiar with some of the issues related to Baltimore City. Having said that, I do believe that, and I'm happy, and I've talked to the chief staff down there, and he's agreeable to have my office intercede between yourselves and the owners to see what kind of agreements or arrangements we can reach, even though project labor agreements aren't required by the law. Now, I've not discussed it with David Portish and the Laurel Group, that they're still an ongoing zoning case, and I think most of the approvals are up in September. All three that I've discussed with maintain, and once again, I take people at their word, but we have to get into the details on this. That in their other experiences, either in Pennsylvania or Delaware or elsewhere, that they've had good relationships with the building trade. Their construction jobs have been predominantly union. Some have had project labor agreements of the type, some have not. Some have other arrangements. Mr. Rickman described his. So I think those will have to be, because they're local projects, local by local negotiations. I don't think you can do across the board negotiation on this sort of thing, because there's too many local issues. For instance, the issues in Western Maryland are different than the issues at Ocean Downs or in Baltimore or in Cecil County. And ultimately, where the location is in Laurel. Finally, let me touch on it because we met in Rockville over the summer. There is a project, large multi-use project that the University of Maryland has entered into called the East Campus Project. The university, unfortunately, overlooked, didn't address the issue of project labor agreements and their thinking on it. The governor got involved and asked before my time that Ralph Tyler, who's the insurance commissioner, to try to mediate and create a project labor agreement for this. There's been ongoing discussions with the coalition that's formed, where labor coalition is formed for this purpose. It includes more of the building trades, but obviously the